Hello everyone, this is Master Viktor Neustroev. So I tried to improve the volume, it should be fine. Today we start our next workshop, and the topic of the workshop is connecting pieces to the attack. So people are still joining. Let me see. Okay, please share your opinion regarding the volume and the video quality. Everything should be working. Last time I did a group event. Okay, so video and audio settings are both good. Fine, last time I did an event, but the volume doesn't seem as loud as usual. Perfect. Let me fix it. Just give me a sec. I think my microphone is connected here. Speakers, microphone. Yes, it works. Noise. Okay, is it better now? Can you hear me better? Okay. Okay, it should be better now. I increased it. Fine. Well, so last time when I did a group event on Friday, things went wrong. Well, my computer got overheated, and that's why the computer started working slowly. Well, I think this time I fixed it. Well, first of all, I cleaned it up. So second, I already created a kind of a cooler for the computer. So it's not hot, but we'll see how it goes. Fine, what we are going to talk about, how to bring pieces to the attack, so how to connect them. This is the main principle of any attack on the enemy king, because once your pieces are maximally engaged into the attack of the enemy king or on the weaknesses in the enemy king's position, then you are very likely to succeed. So once you get your pieces engaged in the attack, your opponent may just not have sufficient resources to defend the position. Well, your task is to create a decisive advantage on a certain side of the board. For example, on the king side where the enemy king is located. It's not enough to attack only with a queen and one more piece. Sometimes, yes, it is enough. But usually not. So if you play a blitz game against someone lower rated, then having just queen or queen and knight into the attack may allow you to win, but very often you need, if not all, then the vast majority of your resources. That will increase the effect of your attack. When pieces support each other, they can overcome any defense or at least try to make such defensive decisions for your opponent much harder. So first of all, what is our algorithm? How should we start? We decide whether the enemy king is weak and we can attack him. For example, if his position is compromised, if there are pawns advanced from the king, if there are no pieces supporting the king, if he doesn't have enough defensive resources, we may consider attacking it. What else? How do we bring pieces? So yes, it's not always possible to deliver checkmate immediately with a few pieces like knight g4, queen h2, and so on. And in order to get a material majority on the side where the king is, we should create some small threat and use such threats to be able to regroup our pieces, to move them from the queen side to the king side, or from the center to the king side, so that they can support your attack. Okay, fine. What else? How? Just, yeah, yes, if you have any. Uh-huh. The H file? You mean black should attack with something like H6? Well, it looks suspicious. We will discuss it a little later. Okay, so let me finish the main part. So try to bring your pieces to the king side using small threats or certain tactical features of the position. For example, a pin of a pawn or even a piece. For example, you can open a file or a diagonal and then bring that piece. The queen often initiates the attack, but the queen requires support. So if you decide to bring the queen to the king side, always think about which piece gonna help you. If you want to bring bishops, make sure that you either already have or you may create open diagonals for them. For the knights, it's better to find some strong points into the enemy territory. Not obligatory outposts, but just such squares where the knight's position is stable, the knight cannot be chased away or can be hardly chased away, but at the same time can support the attack. Such squares are usually f4, e5. Not in this exact variation, not in this exact position, but, well, imagine if you had the knight on f4 and the queen on the king side, your attack would be more successful. We have one of our games where such a situation happened. As for the files and the rooks, remember that if the files are open, your rook can join, but there is another feature, a rook lift. How the rooks can they can support your attack indirectly by creating threats in the center and thus distracting enemy pieces. Okay, so let's talk about this concrete position. What black should do? White is trying to advance on the king side, so it's actually white who is attacking on the king side. What can we do? Well, there was a suggestion of g6. I don't think it's a good idea, actually, because in order to open the h file, so many moves are required. So let's say, how does white continue? Let's say white continues with king g2, so king g7. Can white play e5 already? I'm not sure, but maybe. No, let's play e5. If f takes e5, it's queen e5. So as for this trade, I'm fine. Rook takes. It's an improvement of both bishops. And if h6, I don't really see the point. So this time g takes h6 works well. But if you bring the rook, then h6, well, what can I do? I can already play h4. And if you take, I take, and it's fine. You have the open file, but how do you take advantage of it? Okay. So what do I do? Let me keep making helpful moves. Oh, let's just unpin. Okay. I don't care. So let me take first. Yeah, let me take first. 5. Bishop h6 then. So take bishop h6. I think it's a losing position. So okay, but let's say you play h6 and I play h4. How does it work? So you want to take and play through the h file? So what can I do? I want to open the position somehow. Let me think. So rook h3 will be a check, and yeah, okay. If so, yes, I have to prepare. And for example, here instead of king g2, I can play h4 first, and after h6, just rook here, and that would work. So you can take, you can trade, but one rook is not sufficient. And in order to bring the queen, you have to play like that. But even after that, there is a way to stop it. For example, just this. How do you bring your queen? So opening the H file here, well, no, rook h5 only. Okay, so what can I do? D takes here, for example. What else? Rook h3, it's pinned. So the rook is about to get unpinned soon. Can I play bishop e3 move? Queen h8 then? Okay, take. Then this. So it seems you have to play something like knight e4, but knight e4, I can deliver a check right away and then take on e4. Well, black has... Take. Yeah, bishop takes e5. Thanks, Erush. The bishop is overloaded, so it's a losing position. That's not a proper strategy. So first of all, you see white could completely ignore it. Second, white could capture on h6. And this tension in the center is a very good strategy to parry the attack. This is actually what black took advantage of. They played d5, like Brian suggested, for example. Why? Because it activates pieces. And this line comes from Khan Sicilian. There was a trade of knights on a5. So the pawn goes there. It's quite a common scenario. Well, doing this means d4. So that's why white decided to take. Then pawn takes, and this is how black got more tactical opportunities. There is a discovered attack here. There is a discovered attack there. And d4 is coming in addition. So that's what white tries to secure the position of the king by moving the queen. And let's decide what you should continue. Yeah, so bishop e3 was a blunder. So it's better to avoid troubles and move their queen away, as well as to consolidate near the king. But it's still not enough. The d5 is hanging. But what do you think black should do? I really like the black's position. And I understand it because it's a Khan Sicilian type of position. Maybe it came from Shivaningen, but in the Khan Sicilian, we often transpose to Shivaningen. Yeah, the knight can come to e4. Any other suggestions? Maybe d4 right away? Well, d4 right away leads to a trade, and then white has a better structure. Say knight d5. Some weaknesses here. So that's why the knight goes to e4, and this is how the knight blocks the attack of d5, and trading there favors us. So let's say take, and e3 is the next move. And same thing with a knight. This time e3 wins the bishop. So bishop f3, we trade on f3, and then we take on d2. Knight e4 is better. Bishop d6, Fine, but bishop d6, it's bishop d5, and white wins a pawn, and white wants to trade queens. Once white trades queens, black should forget about the attack, so that's why just leaving the pawn vulnerable isn't a good idea. So knight e4. How did white continue? So they decided that this is unfavorable. They simply moved the knight back and at the same time protected there. Knight d2. Well, they probably should take with their knight. They did with a queen move, but if they took with a knight, I think it's still unfavorable. For example, this can be played, then this, and then d4. So they took with a queen. However, their position is collapsed anyway. So there will be a control over the dark squares. That's right. But how exactly black should continue then? The next move is crucial, because starting from this moment, black started creating tactical threats. And these threats helped black to remaneuver the pieces to attack the king. Bishop c5 threatens bishop e3. Nice idea. But they're gonna play rook e1, can they? Yeah, they will play rook e1. Do we have anything else instead of bishop c5? This is the main power of the black's position. So, of course, with such pieces, black is very unlikely to checkmate, but take advantage of the king's weakness? Yes, they can. Then suggest d4. John suggests bishop b4 to create pawn weakness. Okay. Mark suggests gaining a tempo with bishop b4. Brian suggests h6. Oh, Brian, among these lines suggested, h6 seems to the most weird move. What's the purpose? So maybe you want to transfer the rook like that? So d4 makes sense to open the diagonal. Bishop c5 makes sense. Bishop b4 makes sense. Opens the bishop, but it opens the bishop in this direction. Why do we need such a direction? So let's say they take. So how does the bishop participate in the, not obligatory in the king side attack, but in the place of action? Moreover, they may not take. So h6 doesn't seem logical. So bishop c5 probably, or bishop f6. F6 is better. F6 is better, I agree. Because then, you mean h6 and the bishop comes to f6? Well, you'd better keep bishop it here or there. It still affects what's going on the king side. So bishop c5 works d4, but d4, then there is a trade, and there is this. And it seems that white defended their king, and in this endgame, black is better, mainly because of their dark squared bishop. However, we don't want to pass the game to the endgame. So let's go back. The move that was played here was bishop b4. Yeah, bishop b4. So much better than anything else. Why so? Well, they played c3, and then black did another tactical strike. So you see, these are simple threats. So bishop b4. What if the queen moves? By the way, where does the queen move? Let's say to f2. If so, the queen falls under this. And after that, we can continue with bishop e3, or, which I like most, is rook e3. Threatening to do this and take advantage of a pin. I have a question. What if the queen goes back to g2? What would you play here? Okay. Okay, so here Brian suggests Yeah, so this is what Brian suggested. So what are we doing for those of you who joined us recently, either in our Zoom meeting or on chess on YouTube or at the Chess Lance webpage? What we are doing, this is a workshop. So the topic of the workshop is connecting pieces to the attack, and I prepared 4 examples where I illustrate how you can do it and which concepts you should take into your mind when you do the attack on the enemy king. So rook e3, this is coming, and even if they protected several times with the rook, it works really well. In the game, it was c3, and that's not the end. d4, how does it work? d4 hangs this bishop on f3. So it means that if now they take, this is a check. They move the king, or maybe they block with a queen, and then black can capture on c3. So let's say queen g2, queen takes, king takes, then d takes c3, threatening with this. Maybe there is a better way to play. Maybe there is this move also, but then king goes to f3. So this, king f2, bishop c3, so it seems to work well too, because the b3 falls. Even if not, for example, in this scenario, it doesn't, it's still a losing position. What you can do is just bring the king to b4. Fine. So c takes b4 was played in the game, but c takes b4 means that this bishop is sacrificed. And now, together with the weaknesses on dark squares, they have weaknesses on the light squares. The king moves, rook e2, and it's time to resign. If, let's say, queen d3 is played, how would you continue here? Bishop h1, you lose your rook, and they protect the g2. They take on f3 with the queen. So rook g2, but it's not a windmill. So here, if you play, let's say, this inaccurate move, they take there. Oh, it's still a winning position. Look. Yes, it's a checkmate. So it works, actually, it works. Rook d2 works. Okay, perfect. And if they take there, then you take here. And it's checkmate, by the way. The rook is pinned. Nice, rook d2 works, so that's right. But rook g3 is even more simple. So after this, they have to do that, and you take on c1. So rook g2 is the move. That's why they decided to sacrifice exchange back, but it's just this. It's just this, and it's a absolutely winning position. So rook c8, queen c8, knight goes there, check, knight f1 to not lose the knight, a takes b4, and there is not much to discuss. This is a pass pawn, but even if not this pawn, queen is stronger than rook and knight. So king g2, queen c2, and then it's time to advance, or first bring the king and then advance. d3, d2, and so on. This is how black won the game. So the key idea was to open the position and then create weaknesses into the enemy camp. After trading their dark squared bishop, there are open diagonals and weak squares that we can occupy. However, that feature, this discovered attack, was our main task. And sacrificing the rook to take advantage of that pin was the best way to win. Fine, let's continue. So the next example is the game between Mikhail Tal and Vasily Smyslov. So white to move in this position. Black has an attack on the queen side, b5 was played. White has some potential of the attack on the king side. What would you suggest for white in this position? Especially if you know that it's Mikhail Tal playing. But do not rush, do not suggest the moves that you didn't calculate. What comes to mind? Bishop f7. Okay, it's definitely interesting move, but such a move requires calculation. Anyway, let's try it. Bishop f7, rook f7, knight takes f7, king takes f7. How does it work? This allows us to play knight g5, but the problem is that we cannot move our queen to the light squares quickly. For example, knight g5, king g8, and it seems that we have to continue with rook he1 and slowly, step by step, bringing pieces to the place of action. So this, rook e1. Well, white is okay. White is not losing, and he has a compensation for sure. But Mikhail Tal played knight f5, and you remember I was explaining you when your task is to bring your pieces to attack on the king side, you should, for the knights, you should look such strong points like f5, because if the knight is on f5, the attack on g7 may become crucial. What happens then? Well, in the game they played bishop d8 move, but you probably, well, want to ask me about this. I don't think it requires much attention, because then knight e7, and it seems that black only made their position worse. So king h8, let's say bishop c3 with the attack. I can even sacrifice this pawn. That's why the bishop could move. Maybe moving the bishop with a tempo is a better idea. What do you think? Because it seems that the queen has to move and then the bishop is hanging. This is what Mikhail Tal had either to calculate or to decide or to rely on his intuition. So what do you think? How white should continue, and what do you think about this position? So bishop f7 and queen f6. No, I don't understand the purpose of queen f6. Well, knight f6, pawn f6, why queen f6? Without a queen, you don't win. You have only the knight into the attack then. Oh, well, I don't understand the purpose of a queen sacrifice. If you see something there, can you please specify which exact line you are talking about? Well, the queen should deliver a checkmate on g7, but how? Queen h4, g3. Well, that makes more sense. Fine, what else? Ah, there is no back rank mate, because there is a knight here just. But even if there is no knight, with bishop f7, you no longer have a pin. The rook retreats always. The knight can block there. So queen f4 or queen h4. For example, queen f4, b takes there, and bishop c3. Threatening already to take on g7, or to play queen g5 and then take on g7. If, let's say, knight e8 is played in this position, how would you continue? Knight takes h6. David, did you want to knight g7 and e7, but you blunder the knight? What's the purpose? Okay, so no, knight e7 doesn't work. So it's just a knight blunder. If it was not a blunder, then maybe. Knight h6, this is what you suggested, but I don't understand. This is what you mean. So this is checkmate. So knight g7, queen g7, fine. But if the king goes that way, then what? Take on f7. Fine, but what about king back? Do we have to do a perpetual check? Okay, fine. Brian suggests knight g5 with a David? Knight h6, then what? You take the pawn on f7, and then h6. But they just move the king, so their rook is protected twice. Yeah, there is also a knight. Maybe you can liquidate this knight by capturing on d7, but if so, there is at least a bishop. So it doesn't work so well. No, let's say there is a bishop. So even if there is no when yeah, but even if there was, okay, what does it change? So let's say this and this, it's your turn. How does it change situation? Right. So knight h6 is interesting, but then you have to take on f7 only. If you play knight g5, it looks interesting too, but f6. So I'm not fully sure that this is a good idea. That's why I suggest you doing a more simple way. So knight g7, queen g5 fails because they have f6 and that blocks your bishop. How can you improve such a line? Thanks, Erosh. It's bishop g7, right? Because, then you threaten to take there. Maybe knight h6 becomes even stronger then. But if they take, this time they don't have defense. f6 doesn't help, and there is nothing to interfere on the g file anymore. Perfect. Let's go back. So let's say how to play. Rook e8, queen g5, bishop f8 defending everything, but knight h6, and this time the f7 pawn can be captured. And in this position, let's just play queen f5. With the idea of doing knight g5. So, for example, g takes h6. If g takes h6, it's just rook d7. So bishop takes d7, and then you take on f6 with your queen. So they cannot block it because you have the bishop behind. They can move their king. Check this, check. They have to travel there. You are down a rook actually, but it seems that the king doesn't escape. So queen g6, queen f6 is a threat. So, well, I don't know if Vasily Smyslov calculated it, but he didn't play bishop c5. He played bishop d8, considering it to be more defensive. Queen goes to h4. So if the knight moves, there is queen g4 or queen g3 with a tempo. This is where black decided to take on c4. Queen g5. No, knight e8 means queen d8 simply. So knight h5, that was the move played. Because what else? What about g6, by the way? Maybe g6 would work, and it seems that bishop c3 should be played. However, it's again unclear. In the game, it was knight h5. Knight h6, king goes to h8, and then queen h5, winning the piece back. This is hanging, but it's quite risky to take such a knight. That's why black continued with their own attack, threatening checkmate. And bishop c3, combining the defensive play with the activity on the king side. What do you suggest for black? It seems that black is in a serious trouble. Queen a1 doesn't work. So queen a1, it's king d2, and they are in the trouble. So for example, the queen retreats back, and it can be just rook e1. Step by step, you bring all your pieces to the attack. Nothing is hanging. The position is equal materially, but white is winning because of their pieces being on the king side and because of the vulnerability of the black king. So, well, there is a threat of rook e8. So knight f7, rook f7, rook e8. Maybe it doesn't work. Well, but yeah, there will be rook e8 played at a certain moment. For now, it doesn't work. So rook h1, and this is a winning position. Let's rewind. So how to play for black? That was the main question here. It's not completely losing if black plays proper moves. Knight f6. They played knight f6, and the game ended quickly. And maybe, Brian, you may think how exactly the game ended after knight f6. Because after knight f6, white played a very nice move, and one of the ideas of this move has the idea you mentioned before, a special feature of the black's position. Knight g5 to threaten checkmate, but knight f6 attacks the queen. Ah, but you prepared something. Okay, we will discuss it. So knight g5 is recommended for white, but the question is how black plays here. Knight f6 failed. Well, I will explain why a little later. King takes g7. Okay, let's go over this line. So bishop g7, king, you cannot, queen g5, there is a bishop here. The question is, yes, the question is how black should play here. If knight f6, there is no bishop g7. So what black should do? Queen where? a5? Does knight f7 work? Then okay, queen a6. Okay, then suggested bishop a5. Okay, we can go over it too. So queen a6, how the game may continue then? Let's say knight f7, king g8, and what then? Knight g5. What about knight d8, rook d8? And then knight g5. Because knight f6 doesn't work. I just take it. Or I take the rook actually, yes. So queen e6. So bishop c7, this is how they should play. Why bishop c7? To create a counter threat. Because that is checkmate. For example, if let's say you cover it, they can continue with f6, blocking the diagonal. King d2 and you can still continue the attack, that's right, but it's not a winning position for white. If knight f7, it's just a repetition. So this, and it's a draw. White has a perpetual check, so white was very confident with his attack. Even if he doesn't find the solution how to win, if black doesn't make a mistake, at least white has a draw. In the game it was played knight f6, so how does knight f6 fail? There is a queen hanging. So if, for example, you continue with knight g5, which is a very interesting idea. Look, if knight takes h5, it's knight g takes f7, rook f7, it's the only move, and then this leads to a back rank mate. So it's nice. But what do you think? If knight g5, what's the best black's reaction? Erosh, there is one mistake you made in this line. So Erosh suggests queen e1, but the problem is that after queen d1, if they take with a rook or with the king, knight h5 works, because there is no rook d8 anymore. But the problem is that the queen takes, and then you sacrifice the queen. So that's why queen e1, king d2, and let's take on h5 right away. This is not hanging, but this is hanging. So that's why they are very likely to continue with this check. Take king g8. Now they take our queen. We take on f7, and black is winning. They have two minor pieces for a rook. That's why knight g5 fails. What else? Aha, rook d8 is a move. Rook d8. No, rook d8 fails. John suggested queen takes f7. So who can tell me why rook d8 fails? Because it looks nice. At least by the first glance. Thanks, Erosh. It's queen a1, right? The king goes to a dark square and then it's a check. And then the queen is captured. Fine. So rook d8 doesn't work. Let's use John's idea of queen f7. How does queen f7 work? So the back rank weakness, this is what Brian told us in the very beginning, but it always failed. This time it works. We are threatening with what? With rook d8 at the moment. So how we are threatening with rook d8? Let me show you. I play a random move. Rook d8, rook d8, queen g8, knight takes or queen takes, it's knight f7. Actually, queen f8 is a threat too. Thank you. Of course it is. Fine. Yeah, just queen f8 is a threat. So they have to take it. And if they take it, we can deliver a check there, and it's checkmate. So if they take there, it's again queen f8 mate. That's why they played queen e1. king d2. Now this no longer works. Sacrificing, well, they took on f7 first, but what if this sacrifice here? How do we have to play? No, actually, it doesn't matter, right? So rook d1, let's say, they take, we take, king g1, knight takes here, and we are a piece up. So rook f7, knight f7, king g1, and this time we have to take the queen, and then we lose our knight. However, this combination resulted in a win of a pawn. King e6, knight c6, and white wins the pawn, and then he converted this pawn to a winning position. Does capturing on c3 make any sense? Definitely not, because then this, where does the king go? So let's say king e7, b takes c3, and this pawn falls. For example, that, and here you can do what? King here just? Or it's better to use a rook? Doesn't matter, but it seems like it's a winning. Oh, you have extra exchange. There is not much to discuss. So that's why they continued with bishop b6. Then what? You can take, but then it's bishop b7 and they win a knight back. So here Mikhail Tal just continued with bishop d4 and the game became completely winning. So you see, he didn't succeed with a checkmate, but because of his combination, he managed to end with extra material, which was sufficient to win. Once again, let's go over this situation. So he did knight h6, he took there. Now the number of pieces is equal. He sacrificed on c4, but took on h5. And this is a really tough position where knight f7 becomes a threat. Even bishop g7 at some point, knight g5 is a threat too, and black had to play accurately, and all they had to do is to counterattack with bishop c7, which they didn't realize, and they played knight f6 thinking that this is sufficient. It wasn't. It wasn't, because queen f7 and the weakness of the back rank allows white to end the game in their favor. Let's continue with our next example. The next example is no, there is knight f7. At the very least, knight f7 works. So we have equal number of pieces. So king g8, knight f7, king g8. What now? Maybe knight g5 works. But even if I just trade, still seems like it is winning. I like knight g5. Which knight? In which position I have to play knight d6? It's not clear. Which move? But the queen is hanging. No, they take with their queen. Okay, fine. So knight g5. Which knight? This knight, knight f6. No, this is not what I wanted. So okay, I can play better. Okay, so first of all, what about this trade and then this? And then I take here. Because once I take there, it's a rook. It's not exchange, it's a rook. So, and if you move the rook, it's knight f7, king g8. And what do you think I can continue here? I win more material. Knight d6, knight e8, rook d7. Right. Yeah, so no, it's not enough. Queen e2 was okay, but in order to save the game, they should be looking for a counterplay with bishop c7. Fine. The next example is the game between Garry Kasparov and Slavoljub Marjanovic. Maybe you saw that game already. Again, we see the knight on f5. That's a really good square that allows white to attack and bring the queen to the king side with threats. So he started with bishop f4. Black needs to develop pieces. He does that move. Rook e1. What do you think in this position black should be doing? So, by the way, I see your comments in the chat in our meeting in Zoom as well as on chess.com. So, black should try to play in the center. Well, maybe you can specify a concrete idea, not obligatory concrete move, but an idea that black should do here. So black has an isolated pawn on d5. How about queen d7, rook d8? Slavoljub Marjanovic played queen d7. So then, my congratulations, you play like 2500 player. John suggests to bring more pieces to the king side and trade off some of the attackers. Makes sense. I agree with you, but it's easy to say. It's difficult to do. So like that. I think knight e7, king h8. Does it really help? Yeah, I think it does. So knight e7, king h8, bishop e5. So you have to play this, but if you play this, I win on g7. No, it seems that black is completely losing here. Where does the queen move? It does not have any squares. So this bishop g7, queen h6, it's knight f5, and then bishop g7. So no, queen f6 wasn't a good decision. Because once you trade your dark squared bishop, you experience issues on the dark squares, and white takes advantage of it instantly. Brian suggests knight c5 to bring the knight to the place of action. It makes sense, but Brian, I think they place their pieces like that to be able to protect d5. If you do so, at the very least, it can be this and then that. So b2 is vulnerable, but maybe... No, I still like it. So bishop takes, bishop takes. Oh, queen c6 is a blunder. So bishop c7, queen c7. So which piece do I want to take on d5? Okay, maybe with the knight is better. Then bishop takes, rook d8. How do I play in this position? I don't know, actually. I don't think that I'm better. Maybe just rook b1? Because you don't have a chance to attack my bishop, only with queen d7. But if you do it with queen d7, just what? Knight e3 is enough to unpin. Okay. And then bishop f3. Yes, maybe it's a good idea actually to play knight c5. So, and I overestimated bishop c7, but maybe bishop d6 is a good move. If rook goes there, still doesn't work. But I can I can trade, and you have to take here, and then I take there, and this is where knight d5 works well. Because if this is played, then knight e7 is a problem. Yeah, probably this is where white is better. Not... Bishop b2, knight e7. Okay, fine. So what I think, they should try this. It looks weird, but this knight is so important that it was better to kick it or trade it, even for the bishop. They played queen d7. It seems the idea is the same, but now after bishop h3, there are problems. Well, this is a threat. Of course, black sees it, and he plays king h8. However, that was already a mistake. This is where black should admit that their queen d7 was a mistake, and they should retreat back. Then the game may continue with this move. Bishop c6. Then it's not winning. It's slightly better for white. Maybe rook c1 should be played. I like the white's position, but it's not winning. They played king h8. So what do you think? Remember, in the very beginning of our workshop, I told you that your task is to bring pieces to the king side and at the same time take advantage of tactical features of the position. So how you can implement such approach to this exact situation? Okay, let me give you time to think. So I see some suggestions in the chat. If you have anything else to suggest, you're welcome. Okay, so 94, queen h5, queen g4. Well, queen g4 I think makes no sense, because why? What you are threatening? And your knight is pinned. Maybe they even reply with bishop c8. Queen h5 makes sense. Well, g6, what about this move? Queen h6, and then this fails. Yes, it works. Yeah, queen h5 works. Here. What do you suggest? Not queen h5, okay. 94? This is what you suggest. So this is what was played in the game, right? So queen h5, but before that we cover the other lines. So this, queen h6, and now they can save the game with knight e6, I think. Because if rook takes, the queen guards the 7th rank. Okay, so but knight e4. So taking advantage of this pin allows you to bring the knight to the game. Well, they played that, which was already kind of inaccuracy. Instead, this, after which knight e d6, attacking the bishop. Knight e6, let's say. And what's your opinion? How to play there for white? Okay, thanks. Yes, it's knight g7. Absolutely right. There is a pin. That's why the knight cannot take. King takes. And then, yes, you can bring the queen, or you can just play bishop f5, attacking h7, and then you bring the queen. So queen g4, queen h5, and they don't have any ideas of how to defend h7. For example, bishop g5. If you take, they take on d6. But queen h5 works. If h6, let's say, you can play this move. So if they take there, then you win with queen h6, queen h7. Well, if they take there, then queen h7 works. Similar to this line, when, for example, they continue with bishop f4, queen h7, king f6. And what do you think? How do we have to play in this position? Rook takes e6. That's right. So they have to take it. They have to take it. And if they take it, they lose on d7. That's it. Okay. Thanks. Let's go back. So knight e4. Bishop d8 doesn't work. Well, this move, bishop b2, doesn't look good neither. But let's decide what we should do. They took. What do they want? Definitely our rook. So how should we deal with it? I can give you a hint. Their dark squared bishop is crucial for their position. Once they lose it, they experience serious issues with dark squares. John suggested knight e d6. Okay, knight e d6. Fine. Makes sense. You attack there. Knight g5. Okay, so, well, yeah, knight g5 was played in the game, but knight e d6 looks good too. However, let's say if they take the queen takes, I think. Can they play bishop c6, for example? How does it work? Is there rook e7? Yeah, there is. So maybe knight e6 is a better move then. Take. Yes, maybe knight e6 is a good move. But if you play knight g5, then knight e6 doesn't help. So they played this move. But if, let's say, they play knight e6, what would you continue? Rook e6 with queen h5. Okay, well, queen h5, now they can defend with the queen. So let's say g6 just. Your idea with queen h5 is correct, but you should execute it properly. Okay, knight g7, right. Knight g7, the knight cannot take it pinned, so they have to take it with the bishop, and then we play queen h5. h6 now, well, unfortunately, it fails. Well, what to continue with? I think we should continue with this move. They take. Here you have a pleasant choice of what to play. Let's start with this move, I think. Yeah, with this move is enough, because then queen g6 and queen h5 back. If they play queen e8, then knight f7 works. So king here, then there. Well, if this, then you can play this move and then queen h7. You can try knight h6 also. Let's say knight h6, king goes there. You go where? Back and threaten with this. But actually, I like knight g5 too, because they have to sacrifice the queen, otherwise it's checkmate on h7. Fine, so Right, and if king takes, it's still the same story, and they experience serious issues. You can take there with a rook, then with a bishop, so it's losing. That's why they played queen c7, to try to cover the 6th rank. For example, if we do this, they can try this. So this is where queen h5 doesn't work. That's why Garry Kasparov first plays knight e7. Now g6 is no longer available. And after queen f6, maybe you can tell me the move, and maybe this position already reminds you something. What do you think? Those of you who passed my Chessable course, Train Your Tactical Vision, can be quite familiar with it. What do you think? Yes, it's the so-called Anastasia's mate. At least the idea behind it. So covering these two squares. So queen h6, just bishop f5 first, then we take and then checkmate. But if they play g6, then we checkmate right away. So they probably should move, we take it and still threaten to checkmate. Well, this move helps, but it's a losing position. So you can retreat, you can take on g6, it's still winning. That's why they didn't take it, they played queen d4, however, it was already over. g6, queen h4, still threatening with the attack. The king g7 doesn't help. They did that, and after knight f6, Slavolub Marjanovic resigned, because what can he do? This, but it's over. It's a quick checkmate. Queen h6, king takes, bishop g5, mate. So what did happen in this game? The whole concept was having the knight on f5, doing the attack, and bring pieces to the king side to be able to successfully coordinate them. And the key moment happened there when knight e4 was played, because such a move, due to this tactical feature, allows us to bring this knight to the attack and take advantage of the knight being here on g5 or capturing the bishop on f6. Fine, we have our last example, the game between Vsevolod Rauser and Mikhail Botvinnik. So Rauser, probably you know Rauser's attack in many Sicilian lines, especially against Najdorf variation of Sicilian defense. However, before we proceed with our last example, let me remind you that our workshops are free. However, if you enjoy this content and you would like to support it, there is a button to donate. So let me share this link with you and explain how it works. So you click this button, donate. A pop-up window appears where your task is to just insert the amount you want to donate. So it can be any amount. You click PayPal, it redirects you to your PayPal account. You enter it and then send money automatically to my account. I would really appreciate it. It would really help me to at least pay salary for people who help me to prepare the content. The other way to sending a donation is using Wise. If you have Wise, it works better because Wise doesn't charge high commission, high fees. And it works well if you don't have PayPal, for example. So use this link. My username there is Viktor N394, and you can send any amount. I would appreciate any help. Anyway, the other way you can support me is purchasing my courses on Chessable, on the Chess World, or on my own website, Tricks of Chess. Also, if you have friends, chess players who you think are likely to enjoy this content too, you can invite them to our next workshop. We do workshops on Sundays. It's quite regular. So anyway, let me share this link with you if you are interested in any of my courses. I'm not going to promote anything else today. So let's go back and continue with our last example. Okay, so one more announcement. So next Sunday will be tough for me. I have to leave this apartment and move to a different one during the weekend. So yeah, there will be no workshop next Sunday because of that. I will be really busy. But there will be the next workshop in 2 weeks. So next Sunday is the 14th of December, but there will be no workshop. The next one will be on the 21st of December. Okay, so I don't know if you heard what I said, but what I wanted you to know, there will be no workshop next week, but there will be a workshop in 2 weeks. So the next workshop will be on the 21st of December. Fine, let's continue. I had some issues with internet, but now it's fine. No. Well, this time I don't have problems with the computer. I fixed it, but sometimes I may have problems with internet connection. I don't know why it happens. Especially I have a bad connection with Lichess. I don't know why. Because my internet is fast enough, but not stable. I don't know why. So the last example, the game between Vsevolod Rouser versus Mikhail Botvinnik. What did happen? So it's a typical structure for the Sicilian defense. We have the bishop on g7. So it's very likely it was a dragon. White has more space. The black's position is like a compressed spring, but maybe you can find a way how to release such a spring. Black to move, what do you think? Okay, so Peter wants to capture on f4 and open the bishop. The idea looks good. You open the bishop, what you should expect them? You should expect them to play this move. Also, your bishop is hanging. Yeah, the bishop is hanging, but e takes e4 attacks the bishop on e3. I don't think that white wanted to exchange their dark-squared bishop for the light-squared bishop. No, e takes e4 works. It attacks the bishop, so it's fine if they take here. Now the bishop is hanging, maybe you have to retreat. The problem is that they can continue with this move, and that then it seems that you have to take it. Which piece? Well, this time I think, well, you can take it like that and then play knight d7 and knight e5. And if you can bring the knight on e5, I think your position is really good. But the problem is this. I don't know if it's a big issue or not, because you have bishop f6, and what then? I don't see any tactics at the moment. If the rook goes back, let's say e2, then knight e5, and the position is fine for black, for sure. This is not a super good bishop. So actually, e takes e4 makes sense. You can take with the knight too, and then play bishop f5. That is fine too, but I like with the knight on e5 more. I like bishops, but at the same time, with the knight on e5, this position looks more solid. So e takes f4 is a candidate move. Perfect. What else? Okay, thanks, Brian. Yes, it's d5. That was the move that was played in the game. How does it work? For example, if they take our bishop, we take on e4 and then win their bishop. And now their pawn structure allows us to play for a win. So it's a discovered attack and the bishop is hanging too. That's why they decided to take. It's not the end. Black continues with e4. So sacrificing there, but taking there. This is exactly what happened in the game. So this, that ruins the pawn structure. If, for example, this move was played, it's queen c4 simply. The number of pawns, well, white is one pawn up, but it seems that white loses this anyway. Well, let's say queen d3, just rook c8, attacking the knight. And if they say the knight, then it's knight d5 simply. Okay, there was a question by Peter. So b takes c4, white moves. Where? So no, it doesn't make sense. Why do you want to sacrifice? It will be a queen versus rook and a minor piece. No, it's not sufficient. So e4 was played. Take, and c5. Now this pawn may present a power. So d6 can be played. For example, if f takes g2, then d6 works. But queen e5. So queen e5 contains the idea of capturing there, then knight takes, queen d2, and rook d5. Oh, let me play a random move and explain it. So take, knight takes, queen takes there. Here you may say there is intermediate check. Yes, there is, but then you lose a bishop anyway. And now all your pawns are isolated. So black, if it's not winning for black, it's definitely better for black. This pawn dies, or the pawn on c2 dies, or even the knight is trapped. Fine. So yeah, that was a threat. That's why in this position they played rook e d1, supporting it with the idea of capturing with a rook and supporting d5. Well, that looks okay, but the idea of giving up the e file was mistaken. Instead, they'd better play queen d3, so that there is no pin. The game would continue probably with rook c8, g takes f3, and knight d7, winning the pawn on c5. In order to try to save the pawn and the knight, they could try this move, but after f5, they still lose material. So d6, f takes a4. If let's say what, knight d6, then knight c5 works. So the queen is hanging. They played rook e d1. Now your turn. Starting from this moment, black switched from the play in the center to the attack on the enemy king. So your task is to find how. f2, bishop f2. Knight g4 works, but knight a4, let's say, offering the queen straight. Well, what move? Queen a4? No, I don't think it works. So what's the purpose? These pawns are now solid. Okay, let's answer Peter's question. What about this move? Isn't it slow? Yes, it seems it is. They are not forced to take it. How they will play? This is the second question. So I don't know how white should play. I would play d6 in this position. But not everything is so clear here. However, this time, in case of this move, I can play knight d5. We trade queens, right? We trade queens because what else? The queen doesn't have many good, any good squares, so this is a blunder. So queen takes, bishop takes is a mistake, so rook takes, knight takes a3, knight takes a3. This is okay, I think. This. Maybe counterattack. Like that. White should be winning. Maybe not winning, but better. So f takes g2 is slow. You should play knight g4. Thanks, John. Yes, it's absolutely right. Zamfir also suggested knight g4. Yes, knight g4. Why knight g4? Because dark squares are crucial. With such a move, you also attack there. How should they play? Well, the best line was knight e4. But after knight e4, after we trade queens, they have to take with a bishop. So they have to take with the bishop because the bishop is hanging. And then it's this. And then it's knight h2. So where does the king go? If there, it's knight h2. f2, f1, and so on. If this move, knight f2 doesn't work, but rook d5 is okay. And g takes f3, then knight f2. So knight takes, bishop takes, and, well, white is a pawn up, but with such pawns being as... like firewoods, it's a draw. I don't think white can win here. This pawn is lost. So it's likely to be a draw if they played knight e4. But they played bishop d4, and that was actually a mistake. So what's wrong with such a move? What did they miss? f2. They missed f2 because f2, what? The bishop cannot take. If bishop takes, it's bishop c3 at least. That's why after f2, they have to move the king. Where? Well, to f1, of course. I think that moving there is a mistake. So why is it a mistake? What do you think you should play here? I have a nice move, but I don't know if you see it or not. Who can find it? At least rook d5. Thanks, Peter. Yes, exactly. This is what I wanted to suggest. How does it work? Knight takes, then f1, distracting this rook. Well, you may not take this rook, you may play this move, but it seems to me that with two queens on the board, black is winning. f1 first doesn't work so well. Actually, still works. But you'd better start with rook d5 because you keep this idea and your pawn is still alive if they don't take. That's why king f1 was played. Queen a6. The only way, well, queen d3 is a move. Queen e2 was played in the game, but this move, then bishop d4. How does it work? Well, the queen is pinned. Queen takes queen. Now what? If you take, they take on d4. That's why you first may do this move. If king takes, knight d1 is a discovery check. If they move there, then you first play that move. That distracts the rook, and your bishop is not hanging. So you take here and win a piece. And then bishop c5 next. Or knight takes there. That's why queen e2. So that it's protected. That happened in the game. And queen f6 using dark squares. That's why they had to protect the rook with the other rook, rook cd1. And now what do you think was the next move? It's right. It's queen h4, threatening knight h2 checkmate. So h3 doesn't help. g3 doesn't help neither. g3, it's queen h3. So they play the queen move, queen d3, to create an escape square. This move still looks good, but then the king escapes. In order to stop it, Mikhail Botvinnik plays rook e8. That's right. Rook e8, rook e4, and f5. And there is no way they can keep the rook on the e file except this. After which the position just ruins. Knight h2, king there, and queen f4. And this is where he resigned. So technically, black is only one pawn up, but how to defend against f1? It's unclear. And that's why Vsevolod Rouser resigned here. Fine, let's do a quick summary of this example. I'm sure you enjoyed this technique, and it actually may happen in your games too, especially if you play Can-Sicilian or other Sicilian lines where you have to meet such a pawn structure. So what did happen? The bishop is hanging, and instead of just moving the bishop to the safe place, black created a counterplay with d5, threatening to create a discovered attack. So d5, e takes d5, and then e4. And so once again. So instead of saving the bishop, they play d5. E takes d5. Okay, fine. Let me start from the beginning. Here, in order to have a counterplay, instead of saving the bishop, black played d5, opening the position. The idea is a discovered attack. So white, of course, captured such a pawn, but after e4, the bishop is hanging, and moving the bishop means losing the pawn on d5. That's why they took the bishop. E takes f3. Taking there means losing c4, and then the whole position ruins. That's why they decided to keep two pawns together on the fifth rank. But these pawns are the object of the attack, as well as there is a tactical idea with a bishop attacking c3. And this is where I think white made the most significant mistake. They moved the rook away from the e file, which allowed black to take advantage of the control of the dark squares after this attack. And instead of trying to save the game and draw it with knight f4 and trade queens off, they played bishop d4, which resulted into f2. And the king now has to move because the bishop is simply pinned. Once the bishop takes the pawn, there is a knight lost. So the king moves there, and here black starts the attack. They move their pieces to the king side with tempi by creating small threats, and finally threatens checkmate with knight h2. In order to save the king, they create an escape square, but it helps only temporary. They managed to control their e file, but after that the whole position was destroyed after black captured the pawn on f4 and was threatening with f1. So this is how the game ended. Okay, fine. So today the topic was connecting pieces to the attack, and what you should learn is that it would be great if you can find a way of bringing your pieces to the side where the enemy king is located quicker by doing such moves with tempi, or by creating small threats, or by taking advantage of the tactical features of the position. For example, like it was in Kasparov's game, where we had to find a knight e4 move based on the pin on the d file. And the position of that knight decided the game in the white's favor. Do you have any questions that you want to ask? If not, then let's finish for today. There will be no workshop next week, but there will be one in 2 weeks on the 21st of December.